Welcome back to Africa 54. President Barack Obama says the United States is still the world's most indispensable nation, but cautions against further military interventions around the world. The president used a commencement address at the U.S. Military Academy graduation to defend his foreign policy. Critics have called that policy unclear and weak. Mr. Obama said terrorism remains the biggest direct threat to the United States and indicated the United States needs to stay engaged in places like the Middle East and Africa for its own security. The president also announced plans to spend billions to help nations in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East fight terrorism. Well, for more perspective on President Obama's policy towards Africa, I'm joined by Nii Akuetteh, an independent policy analyst on U.S.-Africa relations. Mr. Akuetteh, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, now you did follow very closely the president's speech, and some would say, well, a good offer, billions to be spent to fight or help fight terrorism in Africa. That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, especially if you are looking at what his critics in the United States are saying. I think the policy is clear. Now, on the Africa policy, he had in there a phrase, to more effectively fight terrorism. And I think that's what we have to look at, because basically he's saying we've already started training battalions in Libya, in Mali, in Niger, and in Mauritania.
Which is supposed to be a good thing, because many people don't want to see American boots on the ground. So it helps when Africans are being trained. That's right?
It does, up to a point. Certainly it's much better than American boots on the ground. But, you know, there's training and then there's training. What do you train them for? How do you train them? Also, which countries are you training? And the U.S. has a record. I'm glad that, you know, you were talking to the Malian minister just before. The U.S. for 8 years partnered with his previous government, Amadou Toumani Touré. And it ended very badly. So my concern, the concern of the progressive African advocates that I work with, is that we have to do the training properly. So we want Mr. Obama to look into the details of what he's proposing, that they should train only people from democratic governments, that the soldiers should be trained to respect democracy, and they should be trained to respect human rights first. After they do those two well, then you talk about let's train them to go and kill terrorists. But if you take any group of soldiers, say we'll just train them to go find terrorists and kill them, that is exactly what went wrong in Mali. Because while they were being forced to focus on terrorists, they ignored the problem with the Tuaregs. So what was done in Mali needs to be corrected before it's replicated in 4 other countries.
Now, what do you do when there is an immediate threat of terrorism in a country where democracy hasn't really taken root? And we're seeing this in West African countries. We're looking at East African countries like Somalia.
Yes.
What is the solution? Well,
the solution is, you know, there is the Africa Union. There are a number of things you can do. Certainly, you can bring in multinational troops like the United Nations or like the African Union and so on, but those are emergency responses. The problem is that if you keep focusing only on the emergencies and don't look down the road, then you ignore local problems that will become terrorism issues. So the other point we make is, in fact, the best tool for fighting terrorism is democracy, which is why you must insist that African governments democratize. You can't force them, but you must not be friends with dictatorial governments.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes situations just kind of catch you by surprise. Say right. Mali, it
right.
looked like a functioning democracy for a long time,
yes.
And then there came this military coup. How do you respond as the United States?
That is true, and the U.S. response actually when Mali collapsed again bothered me because, you know, the French were the ones who led the intervention to stop the jihadists from the north, but actually the Obama administration with their previous UN representative blocked the West Africans and the French from going. It took almost a year before they went in.
So are you kind of agreeing with those who say that it's kind of a weak, the policy is a little weaker?
Absolutely not, because those people, when you look at most of them, were allies of George Bush. So what they are implying is unless you invade with hundreds of thousands of American boots, you are being weak. I think the argument against Obama that he's being weak does not stand on its feet at all. I think he's actually pretty strong. I'm just saying in Africa, he needs to tweak it a little bit, stop supporting dictators, make sure that the soldiers support democracy and that their allegiance, like American soldiers, is their commander-in-chief not to overthrow them. So I think he has to do a few details to get it right. By the way, there are some people that I work with who also think that the issue of terrorism is sort of blown up by the U.S. and that is not an issue in Africa. I disagree with them. Terrorists are killing Africans every day. So Africa needs international partnerships to be able to protect its own citizens. I think African lives should be as well protected as lives anywhere else.
Great, and this is a kind of a conversation we'll have to continue.
Thank you very much.
Right here on the show. Mr. Akuetteh, thank you very much for being with us today. And Mr. Nii Akuetteh is an independent policy analyst on U.S.-Africa relations.